what is usually known as a swanky, nice neighborhood out here in Los Angeles has now become this scene of a homicide, a double homicide at that. Rob Reiner and his wife Michele were allegedly stabbed by their son, 32-year-old Nick Reiner. Their son Nick in the past has been very vocal about his struggles with addiction and even homelessness in his early teen years, even going on to co-write a movie called Being Charlie with his father Rob back in 2016, which was loosely based on his struggles and his life.
We're learning more about the son of famed Hollywood director Rob Reiner. Nick Reiner, now arrested, accused of his parents' murders. He struggled with addiction for years. So we're talking about what could lead up to these horrific homicides. Plus, prosecutors expected to get the case today. We're talking about legally what comes next for Nick Reiner. And today, a renowned author known for co-writing the book Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey is joining us live here on Opening Statements. He'll share his thoughts on what happened to the 6-year-old girl as the case remains unsolved nearly 30 years later. And closing arguments are expected for the mother who allegedly got filler while leaving her 1-year-old baby in a hot car to die. Could Maya Hernandez's testimony tip the scales of justice? It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Tuesday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. Are you ready to have some coffee and some court? This is the show where we get you all warmed up and ready to go for the big day ahead on Court TV Live. A major day it's going to be, and we got a major show for you. So let's start it off as we always do, my friends. Grab that cup of coffee. It's time for my opening statement. Did she sink herself or save herself? We'll see what the jury decides when they get the case today against defendant Maya Hernandez. The 20-year-old California mother chose to take the stand in her own defense, and she cried through most of her testimony. She said that she didn't bring her kids into the med spa while she was getting filler because she didn't want to leave them in the waiting room with strangers. What about all the strangers walking around outside? They weren't a threat to the kids. She then explained that she's a welfare recipient and relies on food stamps to feed her family. Nothing wrong with that. Except here we know she's spending money at a med spa to get a luxury beauty procedure, not a necessary one. Her financial priorities seem a little mixed up to me. Bottom line, baby Emilio's death was preventable. She testified that she had a double stroller in her trunk. She could have wheeled her 2 boys inside. The babies could have been strapped in safely, and perhaps little Emilio would be alive today if she had done that. My friends, this morning, I will say in the close of my opening statement what I said when this trial kicked off. Sadly, I think that Maya Hernandez is realizing now that she had everything she needed with her 2 beautiful, healthy baby boys. That's my opening statement on this Tuesday. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
There's a human need to protect children and to care for children. But the fact of the matter is she's still a child herself. She's barely 20. You don't stop becoming a child when you turn 18. It's a tragic situation, and she's incredibly sad.
The case I was just talking about, closing arguments expected to happen at noon today in the trial of Maya Hernandez. Our cameras are allowed inside for the closing arguments, so we're going to broadcast them live for you as soon as they begin. In Georgia, we've got alleged parent killer Sarah Grace Patrick. Remember her? She's back in court today for a calendar call. Court's going to start up at 9 a.m. Eastern. And in Ohio, we've got the state's case resuming at 8:30 a.m. Eastern in the murder trial for defendant Paul Hicks. This is the case that went unsolved for more than 24 years. This guy's accused of murdering his ex-wife, Regina Hicks. Right now, we turn to your top story this morning on Opening Statements. We're learning more about alleged killer Nick Reiner, who was arrested after his parents, Hollywood director Rob Reiner and wife Michele, were found stabbed to death inside of their Los Angeles home. According to TMZ, Nick Reiner is now on suicide watch while he's being held without any bail. Originally, the court set his bail at $4 million bond, but it was revoked on Monday. Nick Reiner has spoken openly through the years years about his issues with drug addiction and also with homelessness. Back in 2016, he did an interview with his father for the AOL Build series. This was a panel discussion promoting the movie Being Charlie, which partially was inspired by Rob Reiner's experiences parenting his son, Nick.
I wasn't really that shy about including some of the bad stuff I did, because a lot of people do things that are pretty unsavory when they're going through that. But in terms of making it a narrative, of course, it's not my life, but it needs to be constructed into a story.
The fact that we were dealing with, things that Nick had gone through and how I had related to it and how his mother had related to it, it forced me to have to see more clearly and understand more deeply what Nick had gone through.
The Los Angeles Police Department released a statement saying that Nick Reiner is in fact responsible for the deaths of his parents. The case will be given to prosecutors today. Nick Reiner expected to be in court at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time for his arraignment. Let's bring in our power panel now to talk about this case. I have with me licensed clinical psychologist Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, writer and podcast host Zach Peter, and retired detective and sergeant with the NYPD, Dan Murphy. Great to have you all on the program. Have you all on the program this morning. Boy, can't get the words out. Let's start with the investigation. Let's begin there. Detective Dan Murphy, I want to start with you. So right now this morning while we're having this discussion, perhaps there's a detective who hasn't gone to bed from last night who's still working this one. Tell us what they're working on specifically, please.
Well, any crime scene like this, you're going to take your time at. They're going to make sure that they've gathered all the evidence they can possibly gather from the scene itself for forensic examination and for preservation for evidence in court. After that, and during the same time as well with other detectives, becomes the actual in-depth investigation of Nick Reiner, the relationship with the family. They'll be interviewing friends, neighbors. They'll be getting background on a wide variety of issues that may have happened in the past that may be precursors to what happened the other day. They're going to be looking at social media, emails, text communications to get a real solid look at exactly what led up to this. And that's going to take some time. So you are right. There are detectives who have not slept much in the past 48 hours or so, because this is something that you must wrap up as soon as possible while memories are fresh in people's minds. The evidence has to be collected properly. This investigation will be ongoing for some time, I would imagine.
Most definitely. Detective, great insight from you. I want to turn to some more information we're getting from TMZ about what may have precipitated this. So we understand, according to reporting done by TMZ, Nick Reiner got into a heated argument with his mom and dad at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. That was on Saturday night. Rob and Nick apparently got into a very loud argument, and Rob and Michele, his wife, left the party. People at the party apparently noticed Nick Reiner acting strangely there. Zach Peter, I want to turn to you now. The buzz in Hollywood about this, what else are we learning about this party and what may have precipitated this tragedy?
It's uncertain of what the argument was around at Conan's party, but it seemed like, Michele had been opening up to some of her friends about the struggles that Nick had faced. Obviously, he's been very open about, some alleged drug behavior or, drug addiction that he's struggled with in the past. That was obviously part of Being Charlie, the film he produced with his father. So he'd been battling for a while. It's unclear if maybe he'd kind of fallen off the wagon, but there was some sort of dispute that they got into at the party. It got very loud. The parents left. It's unclear if he left with them and met up with them at their home later, but that timeline is still being put together.
Zach, thank you. That's helpful. Dr. Jamie, of course, I want to turn to you on whether addiction might have been part of what may have fueled what Nick Reiner is said to have done. I want to go back to a 2018 podcast. He admitted that he once trashed his parents' home during a meth-fueled rage on the podcast Dopey. He said, quote, "It's not much of a story. I got totally spun out on uppers. I think it was coke and something else, and I was up for days on end." He went on to say, "I started punching out some things in my guest house. Everything in the guest house got wrecked. I literally punched the TV." Dr. Jamie, again, we don't know if drugs might have fueled this at the time, but would you speak to, in general, how addiction and mental health difficulties often intersect?
Yeah, so we need to find out whether he was intoxicated, whether that's drugs, alcohol, combination of the two, and mental health. We don't know. We know there's a very long history of drug use and continued drug use over the years. We know that treatment has failed him many times. We also know that there is a supposed history of mental health, but it gets tricky with substance abuse and mental health because if you're on drugs, depending on what drugs you're on, yes, there is a high risk for violence for certain types of drugs. Now, if you take mental health alone, schizophrenia, a manic episode of bipolar, those alone don't have a high risk of being violent. It usually is more self-harm, or for schizophrenia, let's say, it's usually the person themselves being more of the victim. But when you combine those with substance abuse, you do increase your risk dramatically for violent behavior and aggressive behavior. The manner in which this took place, however, tells you that this was very personal.
Yes, Dr. Jamie, that's also helpful. Stabbings are just chillingly personal. They really are. It's awful to think about this beloved couple, as we know. Zach, let me go back to you, please. As you're waking up on the West Coast this morning, what's the sentiment in Hollywood for this loss?
I mean, he's Rob's such a well-known figure in Hollywood. I mean, who doesn't know him from Princess Bride, right? Or one of my favorite movies is Misery. So I think so many people are reflecting on the movies that he either starred in or directed that, were meaningful to them. And I think it's very somber in Hollywood right now. I think a lot of actors are very sad. I can only imagine how Conan O'Brien's feeling. I'm hearing Billy Crystal, was one of the first on site. That's who his daughter Romy called. So him and his wife were, immediately ran to the home to support the family. So I think there are a lot of celebs, directors, actors that are, some of them have started to speak out and have shared statements, just paying their condolences to the family. But I just think right now it's kind of sad, especially being around the holidays, right at the start of Hanukkah. I think it's a somber time.
It really is, Zach. Well said. We know that at the crime scene, reportedly Larry David was seen there, as was Billy Crystal. We have some video from Fox News. We want to credit Fox News for this. They reported this and shot this video. There you see Billy Crystal and his wife who came there. We've learned that Rob Reiner's daughter was apparently the one who found her mom and dad, unfortunately, in their home. And the second call she made after 911 was to the Crystals. There they are. Detective Dan Murphy, you've worked a lot of crime scenes. Tell us what it's like when you're working one that is just flooded with media, with interest, perhaps with dear friends, like the Crystals and others who want to get to the home and want to see what has tragically happened, and you have to do a job while all of this action is going on around you.
It's very important to stay focused on the crime scene itself and maintaining the integrity of the scene. People like this who are trying to come by, who mean well, who want to check up on things or just want to find out more information, they have to be kept at a distance. And that's just simply the way it is. And frankly, they would probably want to be kept at a distance. They're not going to want to go in and see what their friends look like at this point. But they have to be kept outside. The integrity of the scene must be kept. There is crime scene tape, and generally a rule of thumb is to take more than you think you need, because you never know where the evidence is going to lie. And then you examine every element of that scene that you think you might find a piece of evidentiary, anything with evidentiary value. In this case, with all this attention with the media, it can be very distracting, but that is where elements of the LAPD, let's say their public information office, they will work with the media. Patrol officers will stand outside the perimeter to ensure that the media and other people who are just wanting to either say their condolences or to come by out of general interest are kept at bay. That scene must be kept as pure as possible, so that way it can be presented in court in the state it should be. You can't allow people to traipse in, no matter how well-meaning they are.
Helpful information, definitely. We're going to continue this discussion. Detective Murphy, you and Dr. Jamie Zuckerman are coming with us. Zach Peter, I want to say goodbye to you. Your podcast, again, No Filter with Zach Peter. Thank you so much for weighing in this morning. When we come back, we'll continue our coverage of these Hollywood homicides and talk about what legally comes next for Nick Reiner. And we're talking about the mysterious murder of little JonBenét Ramsey, an author who co-wrote a book about how the 6-year-old died is joining me live on the show.
This case remains a top priority for our department. This past year, our detectives have conducted several new interviews, as well as re-interviewed individuals based on tips that we've received. We've also collected new evidence and tested and retested other pieces of evidence to generate new leads. And I urge those responsible for this murder to contact us.
It is the season for true crime. Each morning, we'll dive into a case that took place around the holidays. Join us for the 12 days of holiday crimes.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
These are the cases that captivated the world.
Couldn't keep my life straight. They were killed by their own children.
That challenged the legal system and ourselves. Court TV, legendary trials.
At approximately 3:40 this afternoon, Los Angeles police officers, along with the Los Angeles City Fire Department, responded to the 200 block of Chadbourne Avenue here in the city of Brentwood. Upon arrival, they determined that there were 2 deceased individuals inside of the residence. The Los Angeles Police Department is now conducting an investigation at this residence here on Chadbourne, and that investigation will continue over the coming days.
The investigation into the deaths of Rob and Michele Reiner is trending this morning as their son is accused of murdering them. Investigators believe the beloved actor and director, along with his wife, who was a movie producer and photographer, were killed by multiple stab wounds. The shockwave from their deaths felt across many communities, even sparking this tweet from former President Barack Obama, saying that the Reiners lived a life defined by purpose. Nick Reiner, their son, is being held this morning without bail. He's expected to appear in court this morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. He will be there in LA County. So let's talk about legally what comes next for him. Let's bring back in Detective Dan Murphy, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, and welcome in retired prosecuting attorney Joshua Marquis. Josh, let me start with you, please. So he's going to be in court in front of the judge in just a short time. Tell us what we can expect to happen then.
Well, not very much exciting. The law in the United States requires that within the first 36 hours he be brought before the court, be told what the charge is, what his rights are, be given the ability to either retain or get appointed a lawyer, and usually the matter in California will be set down for a grand jury. So the DA's office will have somewhere between 3 and 5 days. We shouldn't expect very much to happen today. The only plea he can enter today is not guilty or not enter a plea at all. Not much is going to happen. And then the matter will go before the grand jury. And if the grand jury indicts him, then the things will really start happening.
Then it goes to big court, right, versus the magistrate court where it's going to be today. Right, things can be done, sometimes go up to big court through by an indictment or through a preliminary hearing dependent upon the state. Josh, thank you for that. I want to go to you, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, because something else I keep thinking about with the magistrate judge today, if I'm that magistrate, I'm going to order him to undergo a mental health evaluation immediately. Dr. Jamie, let's talk a bit about if you were in the position to evaluate Nick Reiner. Tell us, please, what kind of questions you would ask him.
Yeah, so first you need to rule out substance abuse and the impact that played. I would want to do what we call reality testing. So kind of an assessment of, is he able to, separate where he's at from hallucinations and delusions. Is there paranoia? So you want to assess for any type of what's called psychosis, and see the role that played in it, because that does have an impact on your logic and on your impulsivity. And also you would want to look at his cognitive functioning in general. Years of substance abuse and unfortunately years of mental health issues do have an impact neurologically. So I would want to take a look at that as well, and again, and how it impacts his cognitive functioning. Mm-hmm.
It's really fascinating stuff. Yeah, I wonder what in the world he was thinking at the time if he did this. Detective Dan Murphy, for many looking at the case, some might be waking up this morning and say, oh, okay, well, what more is there to investigate? But there probably is a lot more. Tell us what we may not be thinking about.
Well, behind the scenes, as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be a tremendous amount of investigation going on, processing the crime scene evidence to ensure that it will help create an accurate picture of what happened. In tandem with that is going to be the medical examiner's report. The autopsies have either been or will be very soon conducted on the remains of the Reiners, and those reports are key factors as evidence in the case. Now, in any homicide case, the single largest piece of evidence, of course, is the body. The body tells you what happened. It has to be read through the lenses of the detectives, through the lenses of the medical examiner's office, and that is put down on paper and forever stands as a record of this is what happened to this person. That theory presented by the prosecution has to back that up. The evidence at the scene has to back that up. It's all pulled together, and that will take a while. The DA's office, in conjunction with the investigating detectives, in this case, the LA Robbery Homicide Squad, they will be doing that work behind the scenes for quite some time to ensure that their theory that they present to court is all aligned.
Dan Murphy, a great insight. Josh Marquis, let me go back to you. At the courthouse today, when he appears before the judge to be arraigned, can we expect him to have counsel? Would you speak to us about that process, please?
Probably will, because of the family he's come from. It's highly likely that if somebody in the family hasn't already retained lawyers for him, there are probably people lining up, as unfortunately, well, it's just a reality. In high-profile cases, there are lawyers that will step forward and say, hey, I'll certainly stand in for arraignment. This is an attention economy, and representing somebody, this sounds awful, but it's simply true, in such a high-profile case. There's not much for that lawyer to do at this point, because despite what people see in movies, there's no magic smoking gun that can be produced. The only thing that can happen is, the most interesting thing that could probably happen would be to say, we ask that the arraignment be put over. Maybe we'll waive indictment and ask that my client be sent for evaluation to a psychiatric facility. But yeah, there will be a lawyer to protect his rights and to make sure that the state is meeting all the deadlines. You can't just lock somebody up and then just wait for weeks and weeks or months and months.
Yes, Josh, that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up about doing a waiver, and if he's proceeding the mental health route, if perhaps there was something that he was suffering from at the time of this incident in question. Dr. Jamie, regarding that. These struggles just seem to plague him for years. I want to play a clip for you. This is from him talking about his troubles. This is an interview with his dad. Again, this is from the film Being Charlie that they worked on together. Let's take a look.
It really clicked for me because we didn't bond a lot as a kid. Like, he really liked baseball, I like basketball, and he'd go watch that with my brother, baseball. But I just, when I saw him do that, and it was something that I'm interested in, I was like, wow, like, he really knows a lot, and like, it made me feel closer to him.
Okay, that was from the Build series, correction there, but speaking about Being Charlie and his struggles, famous dad, very famous dad, a mother in the industry, really successful parents. Dr. Jamie, how about those pressures too? When you come from such a successful family and then you're really struggling and the lowest of the lows in your life. What's that like for him, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it would be very difficult at times, if not always, when you're surrounded by people who are so successful in a particular industry. And not only his family, but the circles that they ran in were also very successful entertainment industry people. So you're constantly surrounded by that, and he had big shoes to fill. And so, depending on how somebody perceives that growing up, it could be extremely stressful. You could always feel that you're not measuring up. No matter what you do, it's not good enough. And I'm not saying that was the case, and I'm not saying that that was his parents' view of him, but we see that a lot with people that have very successful parents and run in very successful circles. They feel that there is a lot that they need to measure up to.
Definitely. We'll continue the conversation. You all have provided tremendous insight this morning. Dr. Jamie, we have to let you go. You've got patients to see. Thank you so much for the excellent insight. Detective Dan Murphy, thank you and for your service as well. You also have a podcast you co-host with one of our other guests, Tom Smith, the Gold Shields Show. So I want to let everybody know about that. And Josh Marquis is coming with us for more opening statements. Don't go anywhere, friends at home, except maybe to get some more coffee. You want to come right back. We're talking about who killed JonBenét Ramsey. This is a question that has yet to be answered. How is that? Well, guess what? We have an award-winning journalist who co-wrote a book about the case joining me live next. And closing arguments expected today in the Cosmetics filler child killer trial. Will Mom Maya Hernandez tip the scales of justice with her time on the stand?
Executive gunned down. Now his ex and her new husband are charged with his murder.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
Welcome back. Closing arguments happening today in the case against Maya Hernandez. She testified in her own defense on Monday. On direct, she said that she went to her car after her procedure. She told the jury, quote, I immediately looked back at the kids. I noticed Teo's cheeks, that's Mateo, her older boy, who was around 2 at the time, his cheeks were red. I looked over at Emilio, that's the deceased baby victim, and noticed that Emilio was blankly staring at me. On cross, the prosecution pressed her on negligence. They pointed to the fact that the kids were left alone for 2.5 hours while she received butt filler injections. Apparently a Brazilian butt lift with liquid filler. Hernandez was asked about all the dangers that her children faced while she was away. She told the jury, I didn't think of all of those things. So let's talk about this. Is she going to tip the scales of justice with her testimony? What do you think the jury might be thinking of her? Let's bring back in former District Attorney Josh Marquis and welcome in board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon, Dr. Craig Ozer. Okay, so let's start with her testimony. She cried the whole time. Josh, do you think she could have swayed the jury?
She might have. I mean, you know, there's an old line about killing your parents and then throwing yourself upon the mercy of the court for being an orphan. This is a version of that. The facts in this case are pretty compelling. She could have brought these infants, and let's be clear, these are 1- and 2-year-old babies, essentially. And they were welcome in the spa. She'd been told that. And she wasn't just gone for half an hour. She was gone for over 2 hours. She arrived at 1. She left to go into the spa at 2. She didn't come back out till 4:33 a.m. It was 102 degrees outside that day. And now the only thing going perhaps in her favor is the fact that this model car, a 22 hybrid, apparently, if you turn the air conditioning on and there's no further action, the car will turn itself off in an hour.
Right.
That's apparently what happened.
Right. Dr. Craig, I want to turn to you on something. So had she gone out to check on the baby, I know, you know, who knows, hindsight's 20/20, but you know, she was gone for 2.5 hours. Do you think there could have been a chance, even if halfway through she would have gone outside, that little Emilio could be alive today?
Yeah, for sure. I would imagine she was in the middle of her procedure and I'm assuming it was going through her head at some point, like, hey, you know, let me check on these kids. And when I do procedures in my office, it's not uncommon. I have to stop sometimes in the middle of the procedure because a patient may have to go to the bathroom. By the same token, this individual certainly could have went out and brought the kids into the spa, and the spa, I don't know why they would not be receptive to at least watching the kids during her procedure.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, they offered to. They said they can stay in the waiting room. That is perfectly fine. Doc, this Brazilian butt lift done by filler, is this common? Is this a valid procedure? We're getting a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a valid procedure. It's done all over the country. When we say Brazilian butt lift, I typically do them in the operating room where I use the patient's own fat. However, that is only done by a surgeon. Now you're seeing a lot of these med spas pop up that are starting to do injections using filler. The same filler you would use on someone's face, their hands, they're now using in someone's buttock area to do a gluteal augmentation, or AKA a Brazilian butt lift. The procedure, can take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, depending on how much volume you're going to be injecting into that individual's buttocks area. So, the other thing is, who is performing these procedures? Is it a board-certified plastic surgeon? Is it a nurse? Is there an actual physician even on premises? And that kind of is dictated by the state where the procedure is being done. I know, like here in Pennsylvania, I could have a physician assistant do the procedure, and I'm nowhere even around. I could be in another country, but they're under my license.
Well, that's interesting. Dr. Craig, thank you for that. When you said 1 to 2 hours potentially is how long this could take as an estimate, makes me think, Josh Marquis, is this defendant telling the truth when she testifies that she only thinks that she's going to be in that spa for 20 minutes? She's under the impression it's a 20-minute procedure and she's going to be back out. Is that helpful to prosecutors?
No, I think that's probably a little bit helpful to her. I mean, it's not an unbelievable statement. The problem is that she's A, been offered to bring the kids in, B, she knows how hostile the outside environment is, and the reality is that she was there physically for 3.5 hours at the spa, 2.5 of which she was inside the spa, and she never went to check on the kids. Now, what exactly, it's important to note that she's not charged with intentional murder, but in California, second-degree murder can be manifest and conscious disregard of a risk. And I think there's a very great risk that the jury could find her, and if they do, she's guilty of second-degree murder. Remember, her lawyer has already conceded the possibility of...
Yes. Yeah, he conceded involuntary. Yes, Josh, we've got to leave it there for now, but we're going to bring the closing arguments to you live today on Court TV. Attorney Josh Marquis, Dr. Craig Ozer, thank you so much for the great insight on this case. Just a tragedy. That precious baby Emilio should be with us today. We're going to wait and see if justice is served in court this afternoon.